Did Admiral Bradley order that second strike because there were still survivors after the first one? Well, here's what they're saying. Bradley was working within his authority, sticking to the law, just making sure the boat was totally destroyed and the so-called narrow terrorist threat was eliminated. That's the official line. Now, was the original order from Secretary Hegst basically to kill everybody, and did that come straight from Trump? The Washington Post reported that, but Hegst is out here denying he ever said anything like that. Meanwhile, Trump's been very open about it. If narrow terrorists try to move drugs toward the U.S., he believes he has the authority to kill them, period. This is Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network, and the wheels are coming off the story. The Trump administration keeps insisting these strikes on drug-running boats from Venezuela were totally legit. That narrative isn't going to hold up much longer. You can already hear the setup for what's coming. Hegst is denying he ordered a double tap on survivors. The admiral who carried it out is getting dragged into hearings. Someone is 100% going to get scapegoated. And if history is any clue, the Trump crew will absolutely throw a uniformed service member under the bus if it saves them from taking the heat. And here's the thing. The administration still won't even confirm the basics. Were there survivors after the first strike or not? Why won't they say? And honestly, what imminent threat would two guys clinging to boat wreckage be posing to the United States? But again, they repeat the same talking point. Admiral Bradley acted within his authority, destroyed the boat, eliminated the threat, asked the Department of War for details. He wasn't in the room, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the entire premise of these attacks protecting Americans from drug traffickers is falling apart. Trump just pardoned the former president of Honduras, a guy convicted by a U.S. Jury of trafficking a massive amount of drugs into this country. Trump even said on Air Force One, just because someone sells drugs in that country doesn't mean you throw the president in jail forever. So how is that different from how he treats Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela? One thing is certain, we're getting more details. There's going to be a congressional investigation. Reporters with deep Pentagon sources already digging. And this administration, they cannot be taken at their word ever. Yesterday, I talked with Jake Sullivan and John Feiner, both major players in the previous administration's national security team. In part one, we covered the obvious point. Ordering troops to double tap shipwreck survivors is illegal, full stop. In part two, we talked about something that's becoming more urgent every day, the military's responsibility to reject illegal orders, especially now that Hegst just fired the JAGs who would normally advise commanders. Yeah, the lawyers who would have told SOCOM, you cannot legally do this, cleared out. People inside the military are split into two camps right now. There's what you could call the Holoi camp, the folks who say you resign before you get an illegal order. A lot of people have been speculating that Admiral Halsey left SOCOM because of exactly this. Then there's the second camp, the people who say, no, you stay in place, because once you resign, you lose all ability to slow down or block the worst impulses coming out of the White House. You can only fall on your sword one time. John explained, this isn't theoretical. These are brutal personal decisions. You're weighing your conscience, your legal exposure, your future, all while trying to actually run operations. And meanwhile, you're supposed to decide whether the order in front of you is legal or not. It's a nightmare scenario for operators. John brought up an essay by David French, a former JAG officer, explaining the difference between two types of orders. First, the big picture policy decision to wage a conflict. Operators aren't expected to second guess that. But then there's the second category, the deeply specific order, like Hegst's alleged direction to kill people who are incapacitated and pose zero threat. That is the kind of order an operator must be able to reject as illegal. John said if he were in that situation, he'd like to believe he'd refuse it. And where exactly is all this heading? Now, they're talking about shutting down Venezuelan airspace. Jake was blunt, no, you can't shut down another country's airspace with a tweet. That's not how the world works. A move like that is a blockade, an act of war, and nobody has provided any legal justification for it. Jake talked about the importance of process. In the previous administration, there were systems slow sometimes, sure, but systems that protected the country from rash decisions. You don't start a war because somebody gets worked up on social media. You get the principals in a room, defense, state, the Joint Chiefs, intel leaders, the president, the VP, the National Security Advisor. You define goals, timelines, measures of success. Without that, you can stumble straight into a war by accident. Jake said he's worried we're getting dangerously close to that right now. These boat strikes are already legally shaky, and they don't seem to be achieving much. And now we're flirting with a wider war in Venezuela. No guardrails, no strategy, no communication with the American people. And this lack of process is showing up everywhere. Even in the Ukraine negotiations, you've got Witoff calling the Russians, Rubio and Vance fighting publicly, random actors freelancing foreign policy. It's chaos, and chaos leads to bad outcomes. Then there's the broader point, trust. A lot of the freedom the executive branch has, especially in national security, relies on Americans believing that even when things are secret, the government is acting in good faith. That trust is gone, and that's going to affect future administrations for decades. John gave an example back when they got intelligence that Russia planned to invade Ukraine. They wanted to warn allies and the public. But skepticism was huge thanks to Iraq, thanks to past deception. Now, after what the Trump administration is doing, the hurdle is going to be even higher. Jay closed by talking about the PDB, the Daily Intelligence Briefing, and the kind of insight his new podcast will give listeners. The feeling of being in the Oval Office, walking the president through global crises every morning,